Welcome to Sports Management Podcast, where you will hear interesting sports management professionals share their stories, experiences, and passion for the sports management industry. I am your host, Marcus Philipson. Welcome to episode 86 of Sports Management Podcast. Before we start, I just want to ask you all for a very small favor. If you like this podcast, please subscribe to it on Spotify and Apple and give it a 5-star rating. It would help me very much in getting it visible to more people out there. Thank you. And as always, we are sponsored by InSport Education, the online business school for sport. For 2023, they have created some amazing new courses and modules. As always, you get 10% off all courses, programs, and modules with the code Sports Management Podcast 10. The link is in the show notes. Now, today's guest is Stephen Vanyo, an associate attorney and NFL agent at the law office of Lloyd, Remick Zane Management Inc. Stephen is based out of Philadelphia, and we recorded this episode the day after the Eagles Super Bowl loss to the Chiefs. Get ready to learn how Philly was like the day after the Super Bowl, what commercials from Super Bowl Stephen think was the most risky, Stephen's opinion on other American football leagues, what Stephen believes the hottest sports law issues of 2023 will be, the NFL turf, his opinion on NFL agent and former podcast guest Kelli Masters, and much more. Stephen Vanyo, welcome to Sports Management Podcast.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm very excited to talk to you. You are an associate attorney and an NFL agent at the law office of Lloyd, Remick Zane Management Inc. So can you tell us a little bit about what it is that you do?
Sure. So on a day-to-day basis, I act as legal counsel to athletes, musicians, filmmakers, script writers, TikTok personalities. Anybody with a God-given gift is a person we provide legal advice for. That ranges from your typical legal advice in the review and negotiation of various contracts, whether that be for endorsement deals, development deals, even something as simple as, playing a trumpet on a song for 30 seconds. There's a contract involved for that as well. So people think that the entertainment industry is, you really don't need to have contracts until you quote unquote make it big. But on a day-to-day basis, protecting your legal rights is something that entertainers and athletes of all size, shapes, and fame need to handle. Then, as you mentioned, I'm also an NFL agent. I'm an NFL agent registered with the Players Association, which involves taking a 3-day seminar and passing a exam on the collective bargaining agreement, the performance-enhancing drug policy, the regulations governing athlete agents that the Players Association makes, and, kind of runs the review and the enforcement of those rules, the review of infractions and the enforcement of those rules. So in that area, we help players get drafted. We help players sign as free agents to not just the NFL, but some of the new alternative football leagues that have come up as well, such as the United States Football League and the XFL. And then there are some other different leagues as well. There's a couple different indoor leagues. The Arena Football League just announced they were coming back in 2024. So we'll see if we have any clients that are in that league when that league reemerges. As well as the Fan Control Football League, which is a newer indoor football league that has a lot of celebrity investment that's doing well. So we just help players get opportunities, and we review and negotiate their playing contracts. We also have experience in marketing as well, so I will seek out various endorsement deals and various other sponsorships for our athletes, and in certain instances, our celebrity clients as well.
So you have quite a lot on your plate there, it seems, and both in sports and a little bit in entertainment and music, as you said.
Yeah, I think one of the things that is important, like for a career and building like a smaller practice like we are, we're not a William Morris Endeavor or a Wasserman or a CAA. We don't have a ton of support staff. It's pretty, efficient and lean bones, which meant that you're right. I do have a lot on my plate, but when I wake up here after the morning of an Eagles Super Bowl loss and the entire city's down, I'm still coming up the elevator with a smile on my face because I get to do something that I love. It's, I started off as a musician myself. We got offered, small record deals. We would go on tours that I booked. And because of that, when I was looking for a career post-playing after my rock star dreams sort of fizzled out, I thought to myself, how can I stay involved in this world? How can I help out people just like me who, the thing about working in this field is that you're dealing with people's dreams. and other types of law and other types of representation. You're dealing with their homes, or you're dealing with their families, or you're dealing with their corporate, or you're dealing with an injury that they suffered. Here, you're dealing really with people's dreams. Everybody has the right to pursue their dream, is what we believe. And we're just here to help, protect the nuts and bolts around it. So that way everybody can do everything as possible, so that when their dream is realized, or that in the pursuit of their dream, they're protected and, preventing their dreams from becoming nightmares. Shout out to Meek Mill. So yeah, there's a lot on my plate and I work a lot, but at the same time, it's a very fulfilling career. It's something that I enjoy very much. And, you don't often get to see too many people in the world actually do a career or be involved in something that they're truly passionate about and they truly enjoy. And I'm lucky enough that I get to do that. So yes, it is a lot of work. Yes, it is a lot of different dealing with people, like getting calls on the weekends, getting calls at 11 o'clock at night, 2 a.m. from a DJ that didn't get paid for their concert gig that you helped negotiate part of the contract for. And they're calling you saying, can you file a suit in the next 7 hours, stuff like that. So yes, it is a lot. Yes, it's stressful, but it's something that I enjoy very much. So, and I'm very happy to be here in Philadelphia, which is such a great city. And, there's a lot more entertainment here than are going on. Philadelphia sort of has a little brother complex to New York and, even DC, and we're kind of not forgotten about, but, discounted. And I think that's kind of a mentality that I've had in my career. It's, I know what I can do. The outside world may not see me as such that, coming from Philadelphia, not like a LA or New York, but there's plenty of talent here. There's plenty of stories that need to be told here. And I'm just thankful I get to play a small role in the helping and telling of those stories and making sure that the contracts and the other legal issues are correct.
Yeah, I mean, that's very important. And you mentioned you're in Philadelphia. We're recording this the day after the 57th Super Bowl. As everyone know, it didn't go the way you wanted to. Well,
we luck out because we have clients on the Chiefs. We have clients with the Eagles. So we're kind of like Donna Kelsey. We won and lost last night. So it made the game a little bit easier to enjoy. But continue. I'm sorry for interrupting.
No, of course. But so yeah, you bet on both teams literally there. So
Well, not literally. No sports gambling for me as an NFL agent. That's that's a no-no. That's a no-no.
Of course. Yeah, living in the town, I can tell from personal experience. I live in Sweden, in Europe. American football, or football as you call it, it's not the same as it is in the US. So can you just explain, a little bit like the vibe and the game, like yesterday and today, like how is it around one of the biggest sporting events every year?
So here in the Super Bowl experience in Philadelphia, and speaking from, having clients in the Super Bowl, the Super Bowl in the NFL itself has become a cultural event. It's transcended sports fans. I say that by when you see every sports party, there'll be people that know very little about the game, but they'll be decked out in Eagles green. So they're not so much into the X's and O's. It's more of a cultural event. And the NFL and which is the National Football League for your listeners in Sweden, they have taken over day of the week in American culture. From Sundays, starting in the late summer towards now, like early February, people plan their days, their lives, their weeks around getting prepared to experience this, for most people, about 3 hours of cultural importance. In Philadelphia, it's heightened. Philadelphia is a football town. We love our football. So all the shops, all the city has been lit up. We have, lights on our skyscrapers, and they've been lit up Eagles green for weeks now. It's an opportunity for people and their families to get together and really bond over something and to put their heart and faith and soul something outside of themselves. So when Eagles fans today and this morning, there's a certain air of despair here in Philadelphia this morning because of the loss. And that's just because Eagles as football fans, like, it's part of your family. Like, fathers pass it down to sons pass it down to their sons. It's something that, you talk with older generations about some of the Eagles greats that played in the 1960s, like the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, 2000s. Everybody knows a lot of people. And I think that, like, if you are performing well here in Philadelphia, you're going to be beloved. Philadelphia appreciates work and effort. You don't have to be the fastest, you don't have to be the strongest, but the players that are loved the most are the players that work hard and have a best attitude. And that's why the city has gotten behind Jalen Hurts so much, is because he embodies the Philadelphia work ethic. He's been knocked down several times, pretty notably throughout his career, but he's always stayed resilient. He's always kept his faith. And he had a fantastic performance last night. So did Patrick Mahomes, obviously. But it was a great football game. It was a great experience. But the Super Bowl it's been going on for 2 weeks. It's all anybody can talk about. You can talk about it with your coffee shop person. You can talk about it with the CEO of your company, with your boss. It's just something that unites people. It's something that brings people together. It's very funny here in Philadelphia. Go Birds is equivalent to hello. You don't even say hello. You just say go Birds. It's hello and goodbye. I'm sorry. I'm happy. Thank you. Any word you can think of, go Birds. It acts as an equal replacement. And that's just because the team is ingrained in the fabric of the city. It's something that everybody can rally behind, and it really unites across race, religion, creed, socioeconomic status. Everybody loves the Eagles. Everybody loves football. You can connect with fans. It unites people so much. And the Super Bowl is the culmination of that. It's something that hasn't been experienced too much in Philadelphia. This will be the fourth Super Bowl they played. They will now be 1-3 in Super Bowls. They won an NFL championship in 1960, but that was before it was called the Super Bowl. So it's not often experienced here in Philadelphia. So when it is happening, it's something to be taken sort of like a celebration, but also at the same time, it produces a lot of anxiety. There are people that were nervous from the kickoff about whether or not the Eagles would lose, and it causes stress, it causes fear, it causes joy. It just puts you on a roller coaster of emotions, and some people enjoy that ride. I know I certainly do. That's why I got involved in the business. But it's just something that there's no other sport like it in American culture where people invest themselves so fully, both with their time, their money, as well as their emotions. It's something that just people put above themselves. And the Super Bowl, again, is just the biggest event of the year, the culmination of we finally get to prove that, as I said earlier, kind of that little brother complex that Philadelphia can have. When little brother wins, it's a moment to be celebrated. So unfortunately, they didn't win, and Pat Mahomes, the big brother won, and Andy Reid, who used to coach here in Philadelphia. So it stings always when, a Philadelphia, who we thought as a Philadelphia guy, kind of, cements his legacy elsewhere, because he never was able to get it done here in Philadelphia, but he was able, obviously, with Kansas City to really do well. But I know it's a very long answer to your question, but it's just a cultural experience like any other. And I use the word cultural experience because it's more than just a game.
Yeah, I can understand that from your explanation as well, that it's so much more. And it must be so interesting from your side, since you're working with different talent involved. Like you said, you had clients on both ends, but also you are working with the announcer.
Yes, Merrill Reese.
Yeah, exactly. And you also do some college sports, like college football, NIL deals.
Yes, sir.
So you are really involved in like the whole spectrum of the game. So yesterday, and also since you have your music interests, so the game yesterday with the sports and music and everything combined, that must be like great for you personally.
Yeah, it's very enjoyable. I think with Merrill, and Merrill has been a client of the firm for like 40 some years. So you've seen him basically throughout every Super Bowl, and it's so special every time that it happens. Like Merrill Reese is, he's not on the field, but he's beloved like any other player. When you talk to people in the city, again, kind of like that generation thing, because Merrill has been working for so long, people's grandparents heard him, people's father heard him, people that, and it just kind of unites all the players as well, because everybody wants to hear what Merrill has to say. There's a moment in the NFC Championship game where they're doing a mic'd up segment, and Fletcher Cox, who's one of the team's best players and a captain of the team, says, "Oh, I can't wait to hear what Merrill has to say about this. I can't wait to hear Merrill say that, we're going to the Super Bowl," because he's the voice of the Eagles. He's the voice of the team. He's the voice of the city. And his ability to paint a scene with his words is unmatched. He's regarded as one of the best in the business, rightfully so. And again, we're just happy to help him out and do things like that. He's always so gracious as well. He's always giving back to Eagles fans, whether it's through charitable events or, doing little shout outs for him, on their voicemail messages. He'll raffle that off sometimes. So if you want Merrill to record your voicemail outgoing message, make sure to check out one of his next charity events. And then, I think just as the Super Bowl, it is, like, as I said, the culmination of all these different factors, celebrities from across the spectrum. It's the place to be. It's the place to be seen. And it's not just at the game itself. It's the whole week leading up to it. Like, every company wants to have a party because they recognize it for the incredible marketing opportunity it is. And, when you look at who's advertising in the Super Bowl, It's not always, let me go get cleats or athletic shorts or athletic branded companies, but it's all different types of companies. It's TV networks, it's beauty products, which, there aren't too many NFL players that are really getting into the beauty product world, but beauty products are still advertised on the Super Bowl because they know it is such a demographic. And with Rihanna performing at the halftime, they bring in a different demographic as well. And I think one of the most telling things about how great people think the Super Bowl is from not just a sports perspective, but an entertainment perspective is Rihanna didn't receive a penny for her performance. She performed for free, and that's because the incredible marketing opportunity and the recognition and the growth elsewhere because of the Super Bowl is there. So, more people buy cars, more people stream records, more people do all these things because they see it in the Super Bowl. So there is a return on investment. Now we kind of see that advertisements, you can skip them after 5 seconds on YouTube. But when you're in a space like the Super Bowl, where sometimes the advertisements in lesser years outweighed the game itself, but being able to see all these different things and always looking at it. So working in the industry and working in this field, you're always looking at like the behind the scenes stuff, like, okay, so why do they do it here? Who's the company that's spending the most money? What are they trying to accomplish? Did they try to time it after an impactful event? Did they, play it right after the halftime show? Well, why did they do that? How can I help that out if a client ever does an advertisement? Like, what can I know and what are companies looking for so that I can better assist our clients in helping them get endorsements and sponsorships as well? How can I make sure that if there's a commercial contract that has a client doing a certain thing, like what can I ensure to make sure that their brand and their reputation is protected? Because commercials will get more out there. Like one I thought that might have been controversial, but I haven't seen too much about it yet, was there was a commercial in which an avocado company, I believe it was Avocados of Mexico, they did a commercial based off the telling that if Adam and Eve from the Bible had just had an avocado instead of the forbidden fruit, that the world would be a place. And I thought, wow, that's a really risky thing because, you don't know how people that believe in Christianity would potentially react to that. Would they find it funny? Would they find it out there? And if you're representing a client, it's not making sure about the legal rights are always there to make sure that people get paid on time, but it's about protecting their reputation and their branding as well. You have to evaluate it based on like what is happening in terms of a client, doing that type of work. But yeah, looking at the Super Bowl and looking at everything going on and looking at it from just the different perspectives, like how does the music angle work? How does the sponsorship angle work? How does the game itself work? Because we are in all these different fields, you take it and you look at it in a different light than just a normal fan would. Now, don't get me wrong, I can enjoy the game, but, I'm just sitting there and as I'm having my like buffalo wings and, my soda, I'm always thinking about how the business end of it works too. And the Super Bowl, as you said, is really the main event in terms of sports entertainment. It really has it all. And I guess that's why it's so super.
Yeah, for sure. And the sponsorship aspect is so interesting as well. And the average price for the 30 seconds commercial I read was $6.6 million. I mean, then you really need to, talking about return on investment, like how do you get your most out of 30 seconds? You don't want someone to go to the fridge and get another beer and skip the commercial and you spent almost 7 million on it. It's the event. It's not just the game. It's also the halftime, the commercials. It's the whole package.
Well, yes, we've seen that in the world that as we talked about kind of advertising and sponsorships, it has to be really, really nuanced now because of how little time people are spending watching appointment television now. It's gone are the days of where people sit down at like 9 o'clock at night to watch a typical drama program. Now, main events that'll happen are sporting events, whether that be boxing, whether that be football, whether that be basketball. That's the only place where live advertising actually has a captive audience. And in certain instances, people can still skip those ads. So you are running the risk always of not getting eyeballs on your ad, which is the worst thing in the world as a company. But what you try to do is that you try to get the conversation started, especially in the Super Bowl, you get conversations started around the ad. Like here we are now today, morning after, talked about the game a little bit. And now we talked about an ad a little bit. So because of that, it's drawing conversation. And, luckily I was able to remember the company name. I think I could be wrong. But talking about that and giving them that brand awareness beyond just that initial ad spot, I think brands have started to realize that it's not just enough to do a Super Bowl commercial anymore. You want to make a Super Bowl commercial that's memorable and can be talked about and just, not forgotten in the next segment. Even at the little gathering I had with some family last night, we talk about the game, but then, we jump in and then we quick talk about, well, I didn't like this commercial, I didn't like that commercial. So even if you don't like it, as long as it starts a conversation, like that generates brand awareness beyond just the people that saw it. So it's important for brands now. Also, with the availability of like YouTube and other social media platforms, those ads can live on beyond the initial broadcast. There were companies that had debuted their Super Bowl ads like way before the Super Bowl. I think it was Michelob Ultra that started to do a lot. The beer company that started to do a lot with premiering it early. And that's because it can generate the conversation. Then it also generates conversations leading up to the Super Bowl. So, yes, you're spending $6.6 million per 30-second spot, but at the same time, you're generating such significant brand awareness and being considered one of the brands that like can advertise at the Super Bowl. It kind of says something to investors as well that says, hey, like, we're a premier company. We're advertising at the Super Bowl. Only the top companies in the world are financially stable enough to do that. So to me, it's a signal that, for example, E-Trade had brought back a commercial that they had, many, many years ago. And it's sort of playing up on that. But it then said presented by Morgan Stanley. Now, maybe I'm not as up on the financial world as I should be, but I did not know Morgan Stanley owned E-Trade. And then, truthfully, I would not have known that, a notable name like Morgan Stanley would have even been involved in E-Trade had I not seen that commercial. But now it's got me thinking like, maybe I should switch over. Maybe I should do that. And without that commercial, I wouldn't have known, because it's just, I'm not totally immersed in that world. So it's a way to bring in people that aren't totally immersed in your world, that are totally immersed in your product area, your product market, to do that. And only an event like a Super Bowl can do that, because it is like, for advertisers, the crown jewel, because you can get every demographic, young, old, Southern, Northern, East, West, different religions, as I said, different belief systems. And you're only going to get that there. So not only you advertising to your core demographic, but you're potentially drawing in like other demographics as well. And there's very few opportunities in American sports that are like that. And it's usually championship games. But even then, different sports have different angles. Like baseball tends to lean a little bit older. Basketball tends to lean a little bit younger. Hockey is a little bit different out there in terms of who watches it. A lot of people in colder areas tend to watch it just because they play it in colder areas, and it's harder to play in warmer areas. But there's nothing like the Super Bowl in terms of getting an opportunity to reach every potential type of person out there. So yeah, I think it's a great thing. And hopefully, for me at least, I hope it keeps going. And I hope, people are starting to get into these other leagues as well, which I think is great. Like the XFL is starting up this week. So before, there used to be like a gap in football. And I always have a bit of concerns with the frequency of concussions, the frequency of injuries that can happen to football players. It's not so much will players quit later on, it's whether or not parents are going to let their kids play football. But I think, unfortunately or fortunately, the availability of professional opportunities plays a role in whether or not to continue a sport. So I wish all the best, the XFL, the USFL, all these different leagues that are starting, because the more opportunities that these players have to play beyond college, well, yes, NIL money can be helpful. For a lot of people, it's not paying the bills at this point. Like, we see a lot of people that can do a lot of good with NIL. We can see a lot of people that do good with other stuff. But ultimately, the goal should be to play professionally. And you can make decent money playing the XFL. You can make decent money playing the USFL. It's not the millions of dollars that the people in the NFL get, but I think players understand that. And as we've seen, like, a lot of these leagues can take players and bring them to the NFL, and those players can perform in the NFL. I think the USFL sent 50 guys to training camp, which is a huge number. And then, of course, Kevontae Turpin, who's a player for the Dallas Cowboys, made the Pro Bowl. He was the MVP of the United States Football League, was playing in Europe previously, came to the USFL, did really, really well, and earned a Pro Bowl spot, and made a lot of money for his family. And had he not played in the USFL, he might have not ever gotten noticed. So I think that there's a lot of players that can play this game. And unfortunately, NFL careers are short. They're about 3.5 years on average. So there's constant turnover of players, especially towards the bottom halves of rosters. So any league that can help players develop is more than welcome for me.
Yeah, I understand that. Like growing the game generally, of course.
Yes.
Looking back on 2022, there was a lot of interesting aspects from a sports law perspective. Sports betting, for one, although it didn't start last year, it took a different heat. We have the NIL, for example.
Yep.
So looking back on that, what stands out most to you? And as a second part of the question, what do you think will be the, sports law topics of 2023?
So I think you hit the nail on the head with NIL. I think NIL is the biggest sports law development this year. I think it created a huge rush that people still don't quite know how to handle. Some companies let with both feet in. What I'm really interested in seeing is whether or not local advertising for NIL grows. So we see like national brands like Dr. Pepper leap all the way in. What I'm talking about is like the mom and pop restaurants, the small corner drugstore. Will they ask a player to advertise them? Because especially in college, when you are in a smaller area or you're in an area without a professional team in the sport that you're going for, those colleges sort of act as the professional team. And we've seen it. Like, I'll give you a great example of there's a college here called South Dakota State. South Dakota State is an area in the northern part of the United States. It does not have a professional team. I think the closest professional team is like a very long drive away in Wisconsin. And how does South Dakota State act when they are sending players to the NFL? They are doing things like this, but on Saturdays, kind of as I said with the NFL, it's like Saturdays in South Dakota, you go to a South Dakota State game. So now will we see more of these local companies start doing NIL deals with the players, and then in turn these players will need good contracts, because things that are taken off the internet and contracts often don't act as what the agreement actually is. They'll have additional language that people didn't really agree to. And, as I kind of said in the Praying Dreams, people are just so excited. And here I am, I can finally make money off the sport that I've been playing all my life, often for the love of the game. And now I can really turn it into a career. They're just going to sign anything. So there's a greater need for legal on both ends, because you don't want a company ruining a kid's eligibility either. There are certain prohibitions that the NCAA has in place about what can and can't be done with NIL deals. There are certain people that have pushed it, and there are certain people that have turned it away from what it was meant to be as, a way for players to make it off the marketing value of their name, image, and likeness, image, photos, likeness, even like the Michael Jordan silhouette. That's the easiest way I explain likeness to people. And it's sort of been used as a way, as almost a semi-professional football league. There are people and boosters out there that are paying players in marketing advances, and they're calling it a marketing advance. And yeah, there may be a few deal or two, but it's sort of with the implied promise that the player plays at the school. And there are creative ways that lawyers can sort of incentivize a player to stay at the school, but ultimately it can't be used to keep the player at the school. So people are trying to use it in a way that's not allowed to keep players at the school, to keep players from transferring. Because with the transfer portal, that's not really a sports law issue, but it's more of a business of college sports thing. Whereas, how does that affect down the line high school sports? Are players going to get recruited later? Are players going to miss out? Are more players going to have to go the junior college route, which is becoming more popular and less looked down upon? Like, there are several players that played junior college that were in this year's Super Bowl. Kaiser White is a great example. He played at Lackawanna Community College in northern Pennsylvania, and here he is now as a starting linebacker for a Super Bowl team, the Philadelphia Eagles. But I think that with the transfer portal and NIL combined together, it's going to create a lot of different things in the agent realm, because, you're as an agent, you're going to have to help the player navigate that transfer portal, and you're going to have to help them kind of, even though you were hired to do marketing, agents do a lot more than that. They're therapists, advisors in business. They help more than just the review of contracts and negotiating of them. But now with transfer portal stuff, some NIL agents will field offers between different schools and their collectives, or they'll even reach out to try to broker a deal. I think that it's ultimately good for the players. The more money that can go to the players, the better, especially with how short careers can be. They're putting their bodies on the lines, and for many, many years, their compensation was an education, which is valuable and beneficial. Unfortunately, it wasn't always being utilized. And then team gear and clothes and things of that. But players didn't have money. Players couldn't get food. And now here we are in a world where players are starting to earn some of their value back. What I think will ultimately happen is that they will get classified as employees, because schools will kind of need to, just to make sure that they can build their teams and have their business end of it, which is, multi-million-dollar. It doesn't just drive, the business for these schools in the playing of the game and the buying of Coca-Cola and the buying of snacks at the stadium and the buying of tickets, but it also drives admissions. People here in the United States like to go to colleges with good athletic programs. If you can buy that with a good education, it's there. There's statistics out there that say that, for every time a college appears in a national championship game of some kind, their applications go up. So for athletics, it's not just about drawing top athletes to your school, but it's also about drawing top students. Students like schools that win. So when you win in athletics and you have a good education program to back that up with a history of solid job placement or grad school placement or whatever you're looking for in your career, that all adds together. I think also TCU just appeared in the college football national championship. And even though they got royally blown out in that game where Georgia did very well against them, they'll still get a bump in applications. So in a long rambling way, I think NIL will continue to be the biggest issue in sports law. How does that develop? Does the NCAA start enforcing it? Does it expand beyond what we consider the national things? And how does it really work in the terms of keeping players? So I think NIL will be that issue. And then if you want to get crazy, metaverse stuff. I think that metaverse stuff and making those avatars will be really interesting. Can I go hang out with my favorite athlete in the metaverse? And can he or she teach me how to be the best in my sport? And then how does that work in terms of keeping that up with the NCAA responsibilities? So I think NIL still continue to be the biggest sports law issue. And then finally, on the outside end, the NFL has to deal with a few different things this offseason, the concussions and the field quality. So those are the two biggest player health stories this year. And of course, the Damar Hamlin situation, which I'm glad to see that he was relatively okay. He was doing well. But with concussions, they had made some announcements that had taken some steps forward, but we can tell based on how some players were hurt this year that it's not perfect and that there's a lot of room to grow. The NFL does a great job in doing the best it can, but at the same time, we're always learning. We're always learning about this stuff, and we want to make sure that players can live long, healthy lives after their careers are over. And then secondly, field conditions. There's been a movement to ban turf fields because players are suffering injuries on them at a higher rate. And then even at the Super Bowl, the playing field is still a story. They got this new type of grass and players were slipping and sliding all over the place.
Yeah, that was talk also for yesterday, right? The Super Bowl was also a big talk that they had spent 800,000 on it.
Yes.
And then people were slipping and or it wasn't like the greatest quality according to some people.
No, it wasn't. And I think you saw like even on the broadcast, it affected both teams equally. So you can't use it as an excuse of whether a team won or lost because they played on the same field. But at the same time, it's the biggest game of your year. And even though it was a great game, it was a great TV, and I'm assuming the ratings will probably be like, I'm going to guess like 130 million people probably watched it, but nobody wants to see that. And secondly, players don't want to play on it because their bodies are how they make their livelihoods. So if you're putting your body in worse conditions, it's almost like, if you're on a construction site, there are certain things that you have to do to make sure that safety is involved. And you would think that the NFL, who has people investing millions upon millions of dollars in these athletes, you want them to have the best care and the best opportunity possible. So taking care of the fields and, I don't think everybody will ban turf. It'll have to be brought up maybe in the next collective bargaining agreement. But I just think that if you're going to, as you said, spend $800,000 on it, and I know they did a lot, the best they could, but boy, it was a bit nervous seeing everybody slipping and sliding out there and could potentially get hurt in the biggest game of the year, and all not because of just a freak thing, but because of a field that's controllable. And that's the thing. Like, we've seen certain fields that work, we've seen certain fields that don't. But now we'll have to see if the NFL takes more overarching action. It's usually been left to each individual team, the maintenance of the field, and there are certain requirements that all fields must have. But the minutia is left to the teams just because it's the most, I guess, efficient way to deal with it, because you can't have the NFL would have to create sort of like a whole system of monitoring it. And again, they do check the fields. I don't want you to think that the NFL doesn't care about that stuff, but just I think that's the next like player safety issue is turf versus grass versus field maintenance versus what can and can't be done. The other angle I maybe see in like the NBA is, here in Philadelphia, we have a hockey team, so it's often very cold on the floor for basketball games. Sometimes water has seeped up in the past onto the playing surface, and they've had to cancel games because of it. And, for this fix, it costs X amount of dollars, and you're risking millions upon millions every time you cancel a game. Or you risk millions of dollars in fan revenue and merchandise sales if a player gets hurt playing on a bad field. So NIL, concussions, and field quality in the NFL are the big issues that I see coming down the line.
Yeah, and I would agree with you, but also the concussion part has been in talks for a long time. There is a movie with Will Smith about it as well.
Yes, very good movie.
Yes, it is a great movie. And according to that movie, when the issue of concussions came up on the first time, then people didn't want to talk about it. They didn't want to, ruin as you talked about before, this cultural thing with the Sunday night football. But for you, who's working very closely with the NFL and NFLPA, Can you see that there's been a shift in mentality regarding this and that you more value the safety of the players more than a couple of years back?
I think one of the great things they did is they had the independent consultant and adding that and taking it out of the team's hands, because the team has an incentive for a player to play. A player has an incentive to play. Literally, in certain instances, players' contracts are structured around them often achieving certain statistical goals or a certain amount of playing time. And if they lose that, it's costing them either the livelihood or vacation or things like that. And if you're at the bottom of a roster and you're playing on special teams and you're trying everything you can to get to the next level and thereby make more money for your family, you have very little incentive to pull yourself out of the game, because in the NFL, the second you lose your spot, there's a bunch of guys down the line waiting to take it. So for the top line quarterbacks and the top line receivers, them getting concussion and being cautious about it, it's always in their best interest to be more cautious, because they know they are getting paid. Their contracts are structured in a way that they do have certain guarantees, but for the other guys, not just the team itself, but the players themselves, they'll play through injury, which we consider warrior-like and gladiator-like, and we praise in our society. But at the same time, like with concussions, we have seen, as you said in the movie, like the lasting, and that it doesn't fully cover all the issues, but the lasting impacts that concussions can have on players' lives. And having an independent consultant and having one that'll make the best decision for the health, not just for the business, I think is important, because if you did leave it up to the players, if you did leave it up to the coaches, they both, especially as I said at the bottom of the roster, both sides have an incentive to not take it as seriously or to talk it away. But when you're dealing with an independent consultant who will pull players out of the game to protect them, I think is important. So yes, there's been a lot of growth in terms of dealing with concussions. And again, as you said, it's something like we don't like to talk about, because we do see that. And especially I think the Damar Hamlin situation woke a lot of people up to the fact that players could die, which is a crazy thing to say. Witnessing a death of a player, and thank God he's okay. But even then, after the Damar Hamlin situation, it's not going to impact viewership, as crazy as it sounds, because it's just, as I said, so culturally ingrained here in America that it's almost unfathomable that football won't happen. But as I said, the thing that I get worried about is when I have children of my own and I'm having that conversation of whether or not they should play football. I think like me growing up, and I played football as well, I wasn't nearly as skilled as some of the people out there, but I think it had such a positive impact on my life that, yes, I would encourage it. Only in football do you have the amount of teamwork and cohesion necessary. Basketball has a certain amount of it. Hockey has a certain amount of it. And great players can go and take over games, but only in football do you need 11 guys all moving in such a way. And if one guy messes up, that's a sack or an incomplete pass or a penalty. So if you're not all on the same page, if you're not all doing this, you're not going to get there. So what I'm kind of saying in that is, like, if teams and players and all aren't on the same page about concussions and what's okay, what's not okay, then we're never going to see any real movement. But I think the Players Association and the NFL both are in agreement that concussions and care for concussions is important, just not only for the player's safety, but for the league's public image. The league has a reputation of taking advantage of people, and in a certain sense, people do get taken advantage of. But to answer your earlier question, yes, I think the Players Association and the NFL are taking it much more seriously than they ever have. And I'm looking forward to see what developments will come this offseason in terms of protecting the players further.
Yeah, me too. And it's great to hear that they're taking these steps. And obviously, first thing is their like health and their, physical shape. But second of all, like some people might have performance bonuses, or they get paid less if they don't play. And if you see Tom Brady now, they say that he will make more money as an analyst, TV analyst, than he made playing. And then you see that these players are putting their everything into these games. They're putting their health on the line. And they might, of course, in his case, he's financially set, I would assume. But if you are not on the top end, and then you are risking your life for something, and then you might, if you end your career early, you have not enough financial security as well. So it's so many aspects to play into the safety aspect.
Yeah, I think that in terms of the safety aspect, and as you said, yes, Tom Brady will probably make more money as an announcer. And would he be an announcer if he didn't have such a great career? Well, I don't know. But I think with that and player safety and player contracts, like, it's my job as an agent and an attorney to make sure that the player has an advocate themselves. Teams have doctors and all that stuff. to help make sure that the team's in the best position by taking care of the players that are playing. And at the same time, like you as an agent or anybody who's an agent, your job is to protect the player, to make sure that they're making the best decisions for themselves. And you can't force a player to do anything. All you can do is act as an advisor and hopefully give them the best advice possible. But ultimately, it's their lives, it's their families, it's their decision to make. But as an agent, you want to make sure that your players are getting a second opinion if it's a serious injury, and you're not just taking everything at face value, but you're really doing like a deep dive and you're really checking in on just to make sure that they're protected as much as possible. As the player safety angle, teams have doctors, and you just got to make sure that you're doing everything you can. You're not a doctor yourself, but just talking to the player and having that relationship in which the player is being honest with you. Agents sometimes get a bad rep as like, leeches or people that are just looking out for themselves. But the good ones amongst us, like we genuinely care about the player and their families. And all we want to do is see them, have a career after. So it's important, as you said, to like kind of talk about like what you do after football, whether it is announcing, whether it is going into business, whether that's being an entrepreneur, whether that's just saving your money and living in such a way that you're able to make your family better. Is it staying with the sport and coaching? We're seeing a lot more players go the media route and starting their own media companies. There are two NFL players, Will Compton and Taylor Lewan, who have a very, very successful podcast. So successful, in fact, that it could be a viable source of income. It's never going to make them as much money as the NFL, just because of the way that, as I'm sure the podcasting market can work, unless, you're a mega star. But athletes themselves, I see the greater thing is like now more than ever, athletes are really looking towards what's my life after this? How do I protect myself? How do I make sure that I get the proper financial literacy questions? And you see a lot of players that ordinarily would get there, not helpful. And I think the Players Association does a great job of vetting and helping. There's recommended financial planners, marketing people, other people to help you out. Like I went through a pretty vigorous vetting process to get accepted by the NFLPA to represent players, because that's the worst thing. Like I said, in this business, you're dealing with people that are preying on dreams and people that understand that just when your dream comes true, you get so excited that you tend to lose sight of the bigger picture. So it's up to us as agents, as attorneys, to see that bigger picture, to see things in the future, to see where things are going, and to make sure that the player or the client or the musician or whoever is set up for the most success possible.
I've spoken to Kelli Masters. She's also an NFL agent, and she said also that it's that's what I thought as well. What he said.
Yes.
And what she said also is that it's a very rigorous process to become an NFL agent, but also in the end, maybe that's good. So, you get the ones that they are actually really good and serious about it.
Yeah, it is a rigorous process, as Kelli said. There's exams, there's seminars. You have to regularly learn and keep up with the things. You have to keep up with your clients. It's the most rigorous of the major professional sports here in America. I know for soccer, there's FIFA handles a lot of the regulations for that. And even then, I don't think it's as rigorous as that. Most agents are attorneys and lawyers first, because it is so helpful to know the contractual language of that. You don't necessarily have to be an attorney to be an agent in any league, but because it is so heavily dealt in contract language and reading that, and not just understanding it for the purpose of the NFLPA. I remember one question, there was a very simplistic legal term that was brought up. It's called tolling. So what happens when a contract is tolled is that it's basically put on pause, as if it's not in existence. And it happens when a player gets a severe injury, their contract or some other things, their contract can be tolled and basically stay. So even if a year has passed and they have a year left on their deal, that other year comes into force. And somebody in our seminar was asking well, what does tolling mean? And that's fine if you're not an attorney, but it just kind of showed to me that yes, if you are just trying to be an NFL agent, law school, while not totally essential, and in certain instances, not always the best use of time and resources if you have no plans on practicing law ever. But for me, I always wanted to practice law. So for me, it is helpful because I know the contracts behind everything, and I know what tolling means, and I know what some of these legal terms mean. And I would have normally got that in just the NFL Players Seminar or everything like that. But knowing that is important. So the rigorous process of becoming an attorney, passing the bar exam, going through 3 years of law school. And then, for me, I studied for the NFL exam for 2 months straight, just reading the collective bargaining agreement, which is a 300-page document, reading the regulations that govern agents, going out, and just like any other major exam, there are people that offer study guides and people that offer advice on how to do it. It's few and far between, and you got to make sure you're going to the right places because it is such a, I think there's like 930 some registered agents. There are other people that are agents as well that aren't registered that represent players. In the Canadian Football League, which has their own players association, in the indoor leagues and the alternate leagues, which don't quite yet have any of their own systems regulating agents. And in addition to the NFL regulation, each individual state has their own regulations that you got to pass. So, for example, I'm representing a player out of Alabama, not the Crimson Tide, but from the state of Alabama. And before I could represent him, I would have to go to the state secretary. I would have to go fill out another thing. They would run me through a background check. They would make sure that I was legitimate. And then they give me my license there, which I have to renew every 2 years in most places. So in every state I have to keep up with them. I have to get registered before that. And then secondly, you have to get registered with the schools. And again, this is kind of off the heels of player agents, doing things that weren't within the NCAA rules and risking players' eligibilities in their careers. For some people it worked out, for a lot of people it didn't. Players could lose their career over a $500 necklace. And if they don't have that extra year to develop in college, or, they get that tag on them of like, this player can't follow the rules, that affects their professional career as well. So in response, a lot of American lawmakers decided that we need these additional protections, and the Players Association themselves saw that many, many years ago, we have to do more to make sure that reputable people are representing these players. And it is a rigorous process, but I think it's necessary and it's worth it. And while it can be a bit of a pain for me to go, get registered everywhere and to keep up with all these different state registrations, especially if, you want to now with social media and communication, it's so easy. It's so much easier than when these laws were first passed in the earlier 2000s. How am I not running afoul of these laws? Because a lot of these state registration laws allow both the state and the player to file a lawsuit against you if you don't comply with it. And while it hasn't been enforced in a ton of different areas, it's a serious issue that, frankly, like a lot of agents that aren't attorneys don't quite remember. It's mentioned briefly in the seminar. They're like, hey, you have to go get registered with the state, so always make sure you check with the state. Some people think that just means I have to register in the state where I reside. It just means I have to register in the state where I have a player signed, or I have to go get registered right after a player signs. But there's different nuances and regulations in these laws that each state is slightly different. They all have the similar principle. You got to apply, you got to pay an application fee, you get a certificate, and then you can sign a player. But there's different rules about contact, who you can contact, who is considered an agent. Is it a family member? Is it a financial advisor? Is it an attorney? Can you represent a player if you're not a registered attorney? And how do those laws interact with the new state NIL laws? Again, which all are different. Now we see some states are actually repealing their laws because they are a little bit more restrictive than the NCAA have modeled themselves. And school advisors saying like, hey, like, I can't do this well. How am I going to be able to recruit players? And I think that, states are always like racing because, again, as I said, like, it is a public good. It brings in millions upon millions of dollars to the state in tourism revenue. It brings in revenue to the university, not just from the direct revenue of merchandise and ticket sales, but increased applications. So regulating agents and making sure that they don't disrupt the eligibility of this is important from a state perspective because it does impact their revenue. If you don't have a good player, then it all sort of a trickle-down effect. So the rigorous process is important for every player. It's important for the player. It's important for the state. It's important for the unions themselves. Because again, the union has a different role in protecting players than we do, whereas we focus on the individual. The Players Association focuses on the whole. What's good for all the players? What's good for top level like Patrick Mahomes, and what's good for 53rd man on the roster or somebody on the practice squad. And it's hard because everybody has different interests in these negotiations and these different rights. Guys that get paid more don't care as much about the fine values. Guys that are paid less and, are just trying to make a play and their head turns a certain way and you get a helmet-to-helmet hit and then you get a letter in your locker that says you owe the NFL $5,000, $10,000 is a pretty serious issue. So the players union has to think like what's good for the whole, whereas the agent is thinking like what is good for my individual client in this instance. And regulating that and making sure that agents do care about that. And you can only do so much through a background check. But it's important because these players, again, are putting their livelihoods and their lives on the line. And any misstep, whether it be on the field or career-wise, can ruin people. And it's a shame to say, but, an agent has an important role to play. And if you're not rigorously vetted in the beginning, there's a chance that an agent hurts a player. We've seen it happen before, and agents also have been hurt by players, don't get me wrong, that, do them wrong in this business. A lot of times you'll see players leave agents, and that agent will have been there from the very beginning. And agents also do a great deal in terms of the pre-draft process and helping players out financially, whether that be covering training expenses, covering housing, covering meals, supplying them with athletic equipment. Because now that they're off of college, they're not oftentimes getting that same facility work anymore. So an agent has to step in. So agents are investing not just their time and effort, but oftentimes their money as well. And it's a very, very tough game. When you sign a player, they can fire you at any point. You can fire them at any point. You don't have to give them a reason why. You can just say, I don't feel like it. And at the time, like, a player will be in the league, and this agent that's invested all the time when they were nothing and really believed in them, player can just leave. And while that's important and good, I guess, because it allows players, for agents that aren't doing the best or their best interest, to get it there, and oftentimes it doesn't mean the agent is a bad person. It just means there's there too. So agents not only have to, you think there's this great sense of relief, and you see this great Instagram post of hey, I've signed this player, but you feel that for maybe about 20 minutes. And then after that, you're like, all right, I got to get at work to prove to this person that I'm looking out for them and I'm looking out for their best interest. Otherwise, I could lose them. Or even if you're doing the best job possible, sometimes you lose them. So all you can do is all you can do. But yeah, that's kind of a winding answer to the question, which I feel like I've been doing a lot this podcast.
No, I like it. It's very in detail. So and also, yeah, for sure. And you said that it's not a must, but it's important that if you're also an attorney. And I'm almost sure that Kelli said the same. It was 50 episodes ago, so I'm not. I don't have it top of mind, but I can almost say for certain that she said that as well.
Uh-huh.
We've spoken for roughly an hour here about a lot about the NFL, obviously, and about NIL, about the legal work. Is there something that I haven't asked you yet that you feel is important to mention?
I feel it's important to mention that for people that are looking to enter this career, for your listeners that are entering this career, just like an athlete will, you're going to face a lot of no's. You're going to face a lot of rejection. You're going to face a lot of serious doubt, a lot of self-doubt. But I encourage people to stick after it, try to enjoy what you do, and try to put a smile on when you're going to work. Sports is a great field, but at the end of the day, it's a business. So if you're not providing value to a player, to a client, then you're not doing your job right. And everybody has a specific role to play within this realm. And if you stay in your lane and be the best possible lane and be the best possible you can be in that lane, then you're going to achieve success. Sports is not just professional, but now it's college, now it's high school, now it's youth. It's an important uniter. It helps people grow. So for any of those that are looking to join sports management careers or to enter the field as an agent or an attorney, just keep after it, keep going, don't quit. Things will happen when they're meant to happen.
That's good. I like that. To wrap up this episode, the last question that I always ask is, if you could choose the next guest on this podcast, who do you think I should talk to?
Oh, who's the next guest on this podcast? That's a good question. You know who I'd like? You should see if you can get the USFL, Daryl Johnston. He kind of runs the league. It's always interesting to hear, the USFL is entering in year 2. They are owned in part by Fox, which broadcasts the Super Bowl, which is why you saw a few commercials for the USFL. But just the idea of how do you start a league? What are your goals for the league? What makes the USFL different in that they have one host city where all 8 teams played last year and they're moving to different host areas now. So how do you get fans of a team that you're calling the Philadelphia Stars when you're playing in Detroit? How do you handle that? How do you handle the TV rights deal? How do you handle the rules of the game, which is slightly different than the NFL? There's actually a 3-point conversion. I think he would be a great guest, Daryl Johnston.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting. And I didn't know that there were different rules for the different pro leagues.
Yeah, I think it's just in everything. Again, you'll have to ask Daryl this if you're able to get him on, but how do you get eyeballs on your league? The spring is not typically football time. Players will still play and practice and train, but we don't in America consider the spring weather to be football time. I think it's personally great. I think spring is a great time to play football, but how do you differentiate yourselves and how do you make it more exciting for the casual fan to entice them to watch the game? Because, while the NFL is the premier league and they usually have the best players possible because the best players are going to want to go where they play that, the USFL has an incredible amount of talent themselves, and the different rules, the different teams, the different broadcast styles, like they've even added different things where they'll add cameras right inside a player's helmet so you can see from their view of like how a play goes. So anything that can help enhance the viewing experience, especially as I said, when, if you're playing in Detroit, it's not like a ton of people from Philadelphia are going to come and watch a team. Maybe there's people that grew up in the Philadelphia area that are in Detroit now, but yeah, the different leagues have different rules, and indoor football, American football is a totally different style of game. The field's shorter, there's less players, it's a little bit quicker, it's a little bit more high scoring. There's a different rule for the kickoff for the USFL as well to encourage more kickoff returns, which you don't really see in the NFL anymore because of just statistically it's not worth the risk, especially if you're going to get at the 25-yard line and keep time on the clock. But the different rules, they help. They're not so different that they totally ruin the game, but it adds a different wrinkle. And even in the Canadian Football League, there's different rules about when the wide receivers can start running. And all these different rules are just meant to help differentiate it, help make the leagues themselves more exciting and a different product that'll encourage fans to watch it beyond. Because, if they want to watch like regular football, they got like college and the NFL. But yeah, all the different leagues have different rules. The touchdowns are still worth 6 points. Field goals are still worth 3 points. Extra points are worth 1. But, and I think they did have a rule where instead of a punt, you could go for it on like 4th and 10. And if you got a first down, you would keep the ball rather than the scrum that can happen in an onside kick. But it's all about experimenting with these new leagues. It's all about, TV viewership is still going to be the dominating factor in TV broadcast rights and getting advertisers to advertise, like the league getting 6.6 for, and that's split between the network and the league. But getting like, all that type of money helps fund the league, which helps fund the players, because tickets and hot dogs are nice, but the TV money and the media coverage is really where the NFL makes the bulk of its money. So the USFL and the XFL are trying to figure out the same way to get media talking about it, to get fans excited about it, to get, highlight clips shared on social media. But yeah, the different rules I think are a good thing. I think football is a great game, but there's nothing reason, you can always make things better. The NBA does it, the NHL does it, the Major League Baseball does it. Live Golf is trying to make golf more interesting in a different way. We'll see how that goes, but I think it's great that, the more opportunities for players, and personally, just as a fan, the more football I can watch, the better. I was joking around with my girlfriend. She goes, "Oh, good, finally, football's over. I get to have my Sundays back with you." And I go, "No, no, 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 no. The XFL starts next weekend, and then it leads to the USFL, and then we get football all year round." She's not terribly thrilled, but I guess I'll start DVRing these games, I guess, so I can go pick apples with her or something on a Sunday. But it's good. It's good ultimately.
That's what she wants to do, go and pick apples?
Yes, just any kind of date. Apple picking, it's a little cold for that right now. Maybe we'll just go, shopping or something like that, or get a coffee somewhere. But she's always like, she's like, "You work Monday to Friday, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Well, what do you do on Saturdays?" This is when we were first meeting. I was like, "Well, I watch college football." She's like, "You watch college football?" I was like, "Yeah, I work in college football." And she's like, "Well, all right, what about Sundays? So you work in the NFL too?" I'm like, "Yeah." So she's like, "So you're working 7 days a week?" I'm like, "Yeah, technically." And she's like, "Part of your job is watching TV?" And I'm like, "Yeah," which is a fun thing to do that not a lot of people get to do. So again, just one of the many reasons why I love this career. And I encourage all your listeners, like, yes, there's a lot of gatekeeping, and yes, it can be difficult to get into the field, but it is, if you truly love it, and I mean, not just the watching of it and the red carpets and the being on the field, but the actual nitty gritty behind it, the stuff behind the scenes that goes on would blow some people's minds in terms of the fighting and the different things that are being said. But it's a really, really fantastic career, and it's difficult. It's a lot. It's very unstable. It's not as stable as people would think it is. But if you love it and you have a passion for it, just keep it going.
I think that's great. And a great way to end this very interesting discussion. Stephen, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the Sports Management Podcast.
Thank you for having me, Marcus.
Thank you for listening to the Sports Management Podcast. Please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any upcoming episodes. Also, feel free to leave a comment about what you thought about this episode. If you want to get in contact with me, send an email to sportsmpodcast@gmail.com or hit me up on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram @sportmpodcast.